looks like I'm muted. First of all, is this recorded? What is the?
It is recorded. Yes.
Okay, great. I'll share my screen. I'm not sure I am exactly set up to answer the questions that you raised just before we started, but what I will say is let's leave those questions to after the talk. This will be a quick 20 minutes, I think, and then we can sort of go from there. I think that the problem is everyone has very high expectations of what an agent is, and my goal was mostly to establish the common sense, state of the art, like what everyone understands to be agents. I presented this talk at OpenAI DevDay, the last one, and so you can sort of see a very short version of this with an actually working demo, which I'm pretty proud of. It's just called OpenAI DevDay, I guess, whatever. And you can find the URL here, so you don't have to take any notes. And I'll drop the link to this slide deck as well. But basically, if you can hear me, so yeah, I updated it for 2025. This is like pretty fresh, but also there's some timeless things which I think is going to stand the test of time. As when I initially worked on the Rise of the AI Engineer, it's kind of like the blog post that I'm widely known for and also widely criticized for. I actually put in, I think the smartest things I did was I put in chains and agents as part of the tool set, and the dumbest thing I did was call benchmarks evals. And so this is actually benchmarks, and eval should be all the way over here, but let's not go over that. I also talk to a lot of agent builders on my podcast. So if you've never heard of the InSpace, Hugo already introduced us, and I pretty much agree with that introduction. I mean, the way I try to think about it is I live in SF, and I try to use my connections to basically bring SF to the rest of the world, and also to mine new tokens from people. So for example, in the upcoming week, we have the first podcast with Karina Wynn, who made ChatGPT Canvas, Task, and Operator. As a side project, or as my like part of my MVP for feeling out what agents are, I try to have production code backing up everything that I do. I also run AI News, which is at small.ai/news. Actually, I'm just gonna write this here. Can I do this? Small.ai/news. And so this is a really dumb newsletter, but somehow it's taken off. I started working on this around about this time last year, and it kind of blew up in March and blew up again in June, July. And basically it's just a fully automated newsletter that goes through and scrapes the Discords that have opted into doing this, the Reddits that don't need opt-in, the Twitters that are public. And it just created auto-generated newsletter. So most of the sort of AI industry reads this, but then also you can customize it as well. And the idea is that actually there's just a bunch of research agents that run in the background and on a cron job every day reporting stories. I don't know where this will go eventually, but it's been a very rewarding project, and it's gotten me to really think about how to improve the quality of an agent and orchestrate large quantities of them, because we really literally span out across all of AI. And here, so I just want to make a brief overview. I don't know how much of this you guys have already covered in the course, but I'll just kind of go over it in brief detail. This is the kind of, I start from very well-known people in our industry saying what they think to be true, and we will go down into the sort of differences in opinion from there. Because typically, thought leaders, when they thought lead, they just do the highest order bit, and they just tell you like, yeah, agent equals LLM plus memory plus planning tools plus tool use, and obviously she drops a blog post because Lillian Wang is amazing at that. But it doesn't necessarily translate from research into industry. And so my additions to her are that you often want a bunch of these extra odds and ends in order to make a production ready agents. And so that's basically like my journey is just the journey of going through and implementing each of these things in turn and figuring out that, just LLM is not enough. And the last thing I want to acknowledge is actually one of my very first agents post was about Baby AGI and AutoGPT back when they were the hottest things in sliced bread. Now it's DeepSeek. And I was wrong. I think a lot of people, when they start out on this agent journey, they try to do the human analogy. Agents should evolve like humans. All their basis for arguing about what we should do, what we should not do, is based upon, well, if I were an agent, I would do this. It's just called the sort of the human-centric fallacy. I think as more people have, and so basically I'm acknowledging that I made the same mistake. We like to use biological basis of human behavior to justify artificial intelligence. And that is typically a good source of inspiration, but typically wrong in the final analysis. A very simple proof of concept would be that airplanes are inspired by birds, how birds fly, but they fly nothing like birds, and they're way more efficient. So in the same way that planes are artificial flights or artificial birds, artificial intelligence basically function nothing like human brains, and we should respect that and design around that instead of this ideal of how humans work. Okay, so the first thing was LLM Infra. I don't know how much Hugo has emphasizes in the course, but I will tell everyone on Earth, I don't care what infra you use. I don't care what like there's 80 of these things. Pick one, get very friendly and familiar with them, with extending them, whatever. But you should have it. And this is the basis of looking all your logs, your data for going in, that goes in and out, for fine tuning later on if you want, but also for doing RAG and doing model routing and having security. This is the typical space of names that most people traffic in. The top names of each of these are the ones that I use, but there are plenty of decent alternatives that you can use as well. I'm not trying to push any particular thing on you. The only thing I'm trying to do is push this mental model on you that you should have something, because everyone, if you don't have this, you eventually build it on your own, and you're going to suffer the same lessons that 80 people before you have suffered. So why do that? Oh, by the way, each of these slides basically comes with homework. So if you look at the link at the bottom, you can just kind of type that out. It's all based in latent space. So if you look at the link at the bottom, there's further reading for you. There's probably a podcast attached to each of these things. We've done a fair amount of work in distilling the thoughts from the people working in this industry. Okay, second part, after you augment the raw LLM, because the API providers don't do this for you. Second part is more of memory and knowledge. People always ask me what's the difference between memory and knowledge. I'm guaranteed and definitely sure you've already done a RAG section, because I think that RAG is the sort of workhorse of the AI engineer. But you probably have not done graph RAG, and you probably have not dived deeply into memory. I think these two things are going to be huge this year in 2025, because they were huge for us in the conferences and like the workshops, and they're top of mind for a lot of people building agents. When I talk to them for preparing for my conference, this is what they're all focused on. They all want a knowledge graph. They all want a memory. They never want to over-engineer the knowledge graph, and they have been burned before, and they're still coming back for more. Like it's one of these things where, if you look at Anthropic's model context protocol, the first thing that they did when they implemented memory was use a knowledge graph for it. It was just kind of very strange and cute and weird, because I didn't expect them to do that. The common wisdom is that knowledge graph is cute, but usually over-engineered. I think there's a right 80-20 to do when you resolve that. But anyway, highly recommend reading the MemGPT paper or the GraphRag paper if you want to go further in memory and knowledge. I've also established a couple of the major players in this space. I would say MemGPT is like kind of now the consensus, but also LangGraph and other people have like really good memory implementations that you want to have. All of these are sort of consensus. Like everyone has this in their stack, no matter what you call it, whether you build it or you take it off the shelf in open source. Okay, the third piece of an agent, I've been calling Planner and Multiagent. These two things are kind of semi-challenged right now with DeepSeek's launch. But I chose to leave them in there because I think you should be conversant in them, right? And what I think about Maven courses is that they're kind of introductory courses, or like introduction to the field. And sometimes you should be told what the prevailing wisdom is so that you can argue against it. And this will be one of those things, right? You should know what OpenAI has put out on agents, on planning and in multi-agent. And this is a paper from OpenAI, and this is a framework from OpenAI. Even though they say it's not a framework, a lot of people are trying to make it a framework. And you should be able to argue why you should not use these things. That is much more advanced. I won't go into that today, but if you've never heard of Lightman et al. And Swarm, this is your introduction. Consider this required knowledge for now. A year from now, it probably won't be. Other things in the planning field, I would say Crew AI has kind of broke through, especially after Jensen Huang shouted them out at CES this year. It's just very, very surprising to me that Crew AI has risen and broken away. They used to be built on top of LangChain as a LangChain wrapper, and now they've ripped out LangChain and they're going really, really hard into being a full multi-agent framework. I also think that one of the biggest surprises that I found, because I organized like a state of AI sort of little mini conference at NeurIPS in Vancouver last month, was that it's very common to have a preset plan, which is like a shortcut for plans that we know to work already. So if you've verified plans that already work, you should reuse them as much as possible. This is the core insight of Voyager. And the people that I've seen do this very well is Devin and effectively OpenDevin, which is now called All Hands. I would recommend you to check out the Best of 2024 in Agents talk that's on Latent Space as well, if you want to learn more about this. Okay, finally, tools. Tools I put in the same category as planning and all that, because you can't really do anything if you don't. You have to plan to use tools. I always try to remind people that people love to hate on LangChain. I always try to remind people like it was basically the first to codify the best practices of what was at the time a very emergent field, and it's very interesting that basically the first 3 feature PRs to LangChain, PR8, PR18, PR9. Were the 3 tools that basically every agent needs today. 1, they need a code interpreter. 2, they need a browser. 3, they need an orchestration loop. They had it back then. It's basically unchanged now. It's very, very interesting. Each of these have become their own startups. Code interpreter now is just a whole bunch of code sandbox startups. Browsers, also same thing. I would consider browsers and search and website extraction to be all part of the same bucket. You can also kind of put computer vision in here, but that's a little bit less reliable. So if computer use agents or operator from OpenAI all fall into this rough bucket. And then lastly, orchestration, like how much do they loop and sort of recover from plans. And that again is basically taken by the agent frameworks. Okay. The last final thing I would consider required reading now, again, this one dropped in December, and I'm fortunate to have them come speak in New York next month, is this handbook of common terminology that is emerging for design patterns for agents. So this is the blog post from Anthropic called Building Effective Agents. I would say these are non-controversial now. Now when I talk to people in San Francisco and I say prompt chaining, everyone knows what I mean. When I say evaluator optimizer, everyone knows what I mean. They might say LM as a judge there as well. So these are all common, and I would assume that any competent AI engineer would know these things. The last point I always make, because I'm basically done, is that you should be prepared to understand what the current field of agents is today, and also to build new agents based on capabilities that are unlocked. This is a snapshot of where I think maturity of capabilities are, broken by 4 groups of maturity over as of roughly October, December 2024. And all of these are going to move, right? So I would say round about end of last year, vision crossed over from being kind of emerging towards kind of mature. I think vision can be further subdivided into like PDF parsing, screen pointing, gaze detection, all that stuff, the subcomponents of vision. But roughly vision, like you can just kind of now throw it at GPT-4, Gemini or Claude and Llama, and you can roughly expect it to work. Obviously, it can always get better. But basically, whenever one of these things has an advance, you should always think about how to incorporate it into your agent, because I think the first people to incorporate them can get massive rewards. The very simple point of proof that I can point to is that when 3.5 Sonnet dropped from Claude, from Anthropic, the first coding agent to incorporate them was Bolt. And they went from 0 to 20 million ARR. I'm not exaggerating. 0 to $20 million in 2 months. I've seen the Stripe dashboard. It's real. And it's just because they exposed 3.5 Sonnet to non-technical people first. It's ridiculous. It's not going to last, but it can give you an advantage in a world where everyone's building agents. So I think if you want to be competitive, this is what you do. Okay, so coming back to like where we are at, that was kind of the summary of like, there's 4 main components. You want LLM Infra Gateway, you want memory and knowledge, you want planner, multi-agent, and you want tools and orchestrator. And then finally, I just want to leave you to some reading resources. I'm very sad about this, but the most popular post I wrote last year came at the end of the year. This is literally during my Christmas break. I wrote this. And of course, it was the most popular post. And this is basically the reading list, 50 papers across 10 domains, what I recommend that is required reading. So if you want, you can go to layton.space/2025-papers. And I picked out SweBench, React, MemGPT, Voyager, building effective agents, which I already introduced you to. I also did that conference talk at NeurIPS, and Graham Newbig picked out 8 problems of agents. So if you want to see the world his way, he kind of explored it this way. I don't necessarily think, I think, less is more sometimes. I think having a simple framework of how agents, what is necessary in agents and what constitutes material progress in agents, I think that is required, and basically, I have 5, he has 8. It's in a ballpark. It doesn't really matter what the cutoff is, but you should have an idea of what the core ideas are and how to apply them. And now we can talk about evals, they'll come after at the end. But anyway, so just a little bit of a plug. I think one of the interesting things here, one of the more interesting things I do is I organize conferences for AI engineers, and this time I decided to focus on agents. I'm not trying to sell anyone on this, but we'll all release this to YouTube. But the most interesting agent that I think people know about but are kind of sleeping on because it's not widely generally available yet is Gemini Deep Research, which is effectively Perplexity plus 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 is what I might call it. It's this little nugget in here. I don't know who gets access. I'm in the trusted testers group, so I get early access. But I think it's pretty widely rolled out. It's basically a way to fan out a lot of research. So here instead of one ChatGPT thing going out and searching 8 sources, they can search 30 sources, 64 sources, whatever. And you can edit the plan as well. So there's the little planner thing. I think this pattern is going to evolve a lot more. If you think about it, Cognition Devin also works in a similar way, except instead of producing research, it produces code. And I think that's the kind of the standard standard model of how agents are built. So very happy to have the lead of deep research there. Oh, here it is. So it's researching and reading all those websites, and a lot more sort of self-resolving as well. It's going to decide if it needs more information, and it can search more. I've seen it search hundreds of websites as well. Okay, I think that is it. We can talk now.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful talk, Sean. And also thank you for, I think a huge part of this value as well is, getting your expertise, what you can tell us now, but linking us to, state of the art, what's happening now. So everyone, please do double click on a lot of the slides Sean has shared, because there's a lot of important stuff there. I loved your reference to Anthropic's blog post, because we've been walking through that quite a bit the past couple of weeks, and you mentioned Crew as well. So last week we did a lot of work with Anthropic's blog post and building out, using a project we're working on, some of their different workflows. Similarly, this week we started using Crew AI, and we did see, and this comes down to the evals and looking at data question, we did see even building a simple Crew in Crew AI, looking through the traces and seeing what's happening there. There's so much happening under the hood that it took us back to, I suppose, thinking through, and this is something we've been talking around a lot, maybe your first product won't involve all these frameworks and all these different multi-agentic architectures. This kind of speaks to the Anthropic blog post as well, right? They do encourage you to start with a workflow and then add more agentic stuff as you go on. I suppose I'd love your insight into your thoughts on not necessarily evals and looking at data and all of that stuff, but what are do you start with something small to build a product, then expand, or how do you, what's your philosophy on this type of process?
Sorry, so is this about building evals, or is it about...
No, it's about agent, it's about how to build reliable agentic products.
Yeah, interesting. I think that reliability as the first goal is the wrong goal, because if you constrain to reliability and not to capability, then you will over optimize. You risk creativity, right? Sometimes you have to let the LLM surprise you with what it can do. and an overemphasis on reliability from the outset can be counterproductive to that, right? Like again, like I think there's a general truth in AI and ML that you pursue capability first, then you go for efficiency, and and reliability and security and all that stuff. And like doing it the other way around is a sure way to feed to do a lot of like really meaningful industry work, but not to get a ton of attraction or attention or whatever on it. So I just want to remind people that like we're still in this phase of like people chase capability, right? You know, let's just call a spade a spade. Okay, reliability though. Again, like yeah, like first thing is like logging everything. If you don't log everything, then like you're just left looking at outputs and not being able to look at the components of the system. So I definitely recommend like it's the trick of adopting an LLM platform is kind of like you are doing taking one decision that takes away all the other 100 decisions after that, which is a very Tim Ferriss thing to do. What is the other 100 decisions? You're like, oh, I don't need a logging platform. I can make my own, and I'm just gonna send this into Datadog to Mixpanel to whatever, and then you find out you have to add other things and add other things, and soon your code base is just littered with like analytics calls all over the place that don't have any coherent system to them, and you might as well just rethink it from scratch. Anyway, that's my little spiel about that. So yeah, I like the. Can idea.
I just ask? Oh yeah, please wrap up.
Then I like the idea of reproducibility in a sense of, it's almost like every .py file that I have should be accompanied by a notebook, where I can grab the input to that .py file and mess with the output, right? And this is a classic issue in Python or JavaScript or whatever language you have, where like the production code doesn't really match the sort of experimentation code that you have, right? Like everyone wants like sort of notebooks that deploy, but nobody has it yet. But I still think like basically I have a rule that every core workflow sort of AI workflow inside of my code base has to have a sort of core notebook that has that stuff that imports the core modules, so I can mess around with it. And like decreasing that time to reproduction, I think very, very important, that a lot of people miss.
I appreciate all of that. I do, on the reliability capability question, I do, part of me, and this may be a provocation, think that we are in a slightly different world to classic ML, which is more reliable than generative AI systems. And I do think reliability and capability are coupled in the sense that it only has a capability if it does it more than a certain % of the time, right? And with LLMs, we just see such flip-floppy behavior.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually challenging to even say what a particular system is capable of, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. No disagreements from me. I think people think like I'm anti-reliability, and I'm just not. I'm not. Like obviously I hate things that like only work 50% of the time. What do you mean? Like of course, right? But I also work in startups, and I also work in marketing, right? And like the numbers are extremely clear. People care about capability over reliability for getting attention. And you can work on the most reliable thing in the world, but if it doesn't do anything interesting, you're not going to make money from that. Whereas the opposite way, if you make the most highly capable thing in the world, but it only works, I don't know, a cherry pick 3% of the time, you can be Devin.
I was going to say my cynicism for all the frameworks thus far, the most popular ones, have started that way, just make it really easy to do something.
I know.
And then now we're on the eval.
Yeah, but like you can choose. Like I find that a lot of the ML people who are very serious, they come from very serious backgrounds. They put huge systems in production. They're like, man, this is not reliable. This is unacceptable. These kids don't know what they're doing. I think they're just like salty. You know, they're just like. Like
guilty.
These guys are raising like $2 billion, and like their shit doesn't work, and I'm like, okay, like do that and do better than them, right? Don't sit there and complain, because like at the end of the day, like people want to be inspired. People want to see, like, okay, that's the dream. That's where we all want to go. We all agree on that. All right, let's go there and try to make it work. And I think like. The sort of prize goes to the people who are trying to push the frontier, And sometimes that means you establish a low baseline, very, very low baseline, and you push it up. And like Cognition is very roundly criticized. They didn't give up. They're still doing. They're still working on it. And like sometimes I criticize as being a fan of them. I'm a fan of their process and their team, their ideas. Not the product right now. I don't use it. I've had free access for a year. I don't use it. But like I can see them progressing, and that's what we should all do. I don't know.
I totally agree. And once again, it's time to wrap up now, sadly. If people do have other questions, feel free to answer them on Discord. I can't promise Swix will respond to all of them, but
just at me. Yeah, because otherwise I won't see it. I've got like 3,000 Discords.
Well, I just want to thank you for not only for your time and wisdom, Swix, but just for all the, you're a node among other things that brings so much information and distributes it so efficiently. So really appreciate you coming and sharing your philosophy and practice, and also all the resources for everyone to dive into as well, which to your point is part of what these courses are about. So appreciate you, man.
Yeah, happy to help. And I hope someone from this course goes and builds some awesome agents, and I'll be happy to learn from you.
Absolutely. And anyone who's going to be in New York in February, please do check out Swix's conference. And I'll share it in Discord as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, everyone. I'm going to put one final thing. I'm going to put the form for feedback for this workshop in Discord, not in the chat here. So please do give us some feedback afterwards. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all for the final workshop in 48 hours. All right. Thanks, everyone. Ciao.